Let's say that I am just a humble corn farmer and I'm expecting to harvest my corn at the end of the summer. But one thing I don't want to do is incur the risk that the price of corn changes drastically from now until the time that I harvest it. So, what I want to do is put in a hedge that I can lock in the price of my corn today so I don't have to worry about that price risk over time. So, let's say I go to a futures exchange and then I go to find a futures contract on corn to offset and hedge my position with. But for whatever reason, there's no futures contract for corn. The exchange just doesn't have it. So what I'll have to do is go look at other contracts of different commodities and find one with the highest correlation to corn. So let's say I went and did that. I used CME and I found that soybeans are the commodity that have the closest correlation of price movements to corn. So I go and I find the last 10 months of data on changes in the prices of corn. And then I also find over the last 10 months the changes in prices of soybeans. So in this example, the corn is going to be our spot asset that we're looking to hedge. And then the soybean is going to be our futures contract asset that we're using to hedge. Now, because we're looking to hedge our exposure to corn, what we're going to need to do is find the optimal number of futures contracts that we should purchase to hedge our exposure. But in order to do that, we must first find the minimum variance hedge ratio. And we can find that by using this formula here. H star is the minimum variance hedge ratio. So let's first find the standard deviation of the spot price. So that's just going to be equal to standard.dev or standard.dev.s. I'm using S for sample because it's a small sample size. Let's grab that range, hit enter. And now let's find the standard deviation of the futures price, which is going to be equal to standard.dev.s. And we'll just highlight this range right here. This Greek rho symbol represents the correlation between the spot and the futures prices. So we can just use the equals correl function. And then we'll just grab this range, hit control, and then grab this range as well, and then hit enter. And so this should be pretty easy for us now to just find our minimum variance hedge ratio, which is just going to be equal to the correlation between the two multiplied by the standard deviation of the spot price divided by the standard deviation of the futures price. So that gives us a value of about 89%. And another interesting thing about this is that if we were to sort of plot all of these changes in prices of the spot prices with the horizontal axis and then the futures price with the vertical axis, and then plot a best fit line between this regression, let me insert a line here, I'm just eyeballing it, like this, the slope of this line would be about equal to this 89%. Now that we have our minimum variance hedge ratio, we can go on and calculate our optimal number of futures contracts. And we can do so using this formula, which says that the optimal number of futures contracts is going to be equal to the hedge ratio multiplied by the quantity of the asset being hedged divided by the quantity of one futures contract. So what the amount of, let's say, bushels of soybeans that are underlying one futures contract. And so for this example, let's just say that we've got about 400,000 bushels of corn that need to be hedged, and that each futures contract is underlied by about 5,000 bushels of soybeans. So let's just go ahead and calculate our optimal number of futures contracts. So that's going to be equal to the hedge ratio here multiplied by the number of bushels of corn that we need to hedge divided by how many bushels of soybeans underlie each contract, and hit enter. So this tells us we're going to need 71.35 contracts. So normally you can't buy a part of a contract, you have to buy a whole contract. But for now, let's just go on assuming we can buy a fraction of a contract. So now that we've calculated our optimal number of futures contracts, we can walk through an example of what will happen to our total gain on this position or loss now that we're doing this cross hedging if the price of corn changes and the price of soybeans change in the future. So let's just go ahead and assume that the change in our spot price, so the change in the price of a bushel of corn is just $1. So each bushel gets $1 more expensive. Now we can calculate what is the total change in the dollar value of a price of a single soybean bushel. And to do that, we're going to make the assumption that the correlation between the spot and the future price holds true, and this minimum variance hedge ratio holds true. So what we should expect to see in the change in price of the future, or the soybean bushel, is just going to be equal to that change in the price of the spot price divided by the minimum variance hedge ratio. So we should expect each bushel to increase by $1.12. Now, what is going to be the total gain on all of our futures contracts? Well, that will just be equal to the number of contracts that we purchased multiplied by the quantity of bushels underlying each futures contract multiplied by the total change in value of a bushel, and let's hit enter. So we find that gain on the futures contract is equal to exactly $400,000. And so our total gain should be equal to that total gain on the futures contracts minus the change in the spot price times the quantity of the asset being hedged. So we'll find that right now by taking that $400,000 that we calculated here and subtracting out the change in the spot price times that $400,000, or that 400,000 bushels of corn we needed to hedge, and hit enter. And we find that if we've hedged this thing perfectly, there should be no gain or loss if these prices are changing. However, one thing I'd point out is, so we made the assumption that we could buy 0.35 of a futures contract. Normally you'd have to round to 1. So let's say if we actually could only purchase 71, then we should see that there should be some gain or loss on this position, because now it can't be a perfectly cross-hedged. You can feel free to download the file that I created for free using the link in the description or the pinned comment. Hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe for more videos just like it. Thank you.